Well, this morning I wanted to talk with you a little bit about the difference between empty and full. There are lots of ways to think about empty and full. For example, think about those of you who drive a car. How far can your car go when it's full of gas? And what about when it's empty? Here's a question for all of you who are using tablets or phones and are zooming in. What happens when your battery charge is empty? And what can you do when it's full? If the batteries on our camera is empty here at the church, you won't be able to see me anymore. And I'm a little bit worried about the batteries in my microphone today because they don't look full. And so if they end up being empty, you're not gonna hear me anymore, and there will be a lot of scrambling about. What about this glass of water? Can you see it online? Can you see it back there? Is it empty or full? Is it? Empty or full? How can you tell if something is empty or full? Sometimes you can see it, sometimes you can't. For example, I have up here, among the things I have, now my stomach is full of water, I have an empty can here up on the table. And I've been told that if I know the trick, I can make this empty can become full again. What do you think? Do you think I can? All right. Well, let's see. There's a trick. I think there's a trick. I think you're supposed to start from the bottom. And let's see if I start from the bottom. I don't know. Let's see. Oh, I think you do start from the bottom. Whoa. Wait a second. Something is happening. Something is definitely happening. I think you're supposed to rub the top. I'm rubbing. I think I have a full can. What do you think? Is it full? Hasn't been opened. Should I open it and see what happens? I'm going to put some in here too. Look. Ha! Empty or full? What do you think? Was that impressive? That worked better than it did in practice, I'll tell you that. Now, do you think I can do it again? I do not think I can do it again. Let's stop while the getting is good. Now, some of you probably already know how I did that. Those of you online probably could see how I did it. Maybe not. It was just a trick, though. But the point is we can't always tell if something is empty or full. Sometimes we can see, but I told you that my stomach was full of water. You wouldn't have known that unless you saw me drink it. Is anybody hungry this morning? Did you have a big breakfast? Did you have no breakfast at all? I can't tell by looking at you whether you are hungry or not, whether your stomach is empty or full. You can't really tell that from the outside. And I was wondering how you could tell, or if you can tell, if somebody is feeling full of God's love. How could you tell? How are you feeling today? Are you feeling empty, worn out, spent? Are you feeling full of joy, full of energy, full of promise, full of love? Today's story is about a miracle, one of Jesus' miracles. And a miracle is something amazing that you don't expect. And in today's story, Jesus is at a party, and the wine that they have to drink runs out. All the bottles are empty. But somehow, they get full again. And Jesus used these kind of miracles to talk about and teach people about being filled up with God's love. How God can use very ordinary things and fill them up with extraordinary love. And this is the first one in the second chapter of John. And it seems a bit strange, to modern ears anyway, that the first story John would tell us to show how special Jesus is should be about wine at a party. And while it may be hard for us to relate to any story in the Bible, right now it's even harder for us to relate to this one. We're not attending parties these days. Weddings, for example, have been dramatically shifted or scaled back. Right now, providing alcohol after 10 o'clock p.m. is illegal, so running out of wine is not our biggest problem. Frankly, running out of wine would never be our biggest problem today. It might be embarrassing, I suppose, for a host to run out of food or drink, but not the source of shame it might have been in ancient cultures where hospitality was a matter of truly life or death. If you could not host others, you could not depend on others to host you in what was often a hostile and perilous environment. Indeed, the community often came together in just such moments. So for this event to run out of wine might also indicate a lack of community support for these people. That's no good. At any rate, the stakes in this story are higher than we might first assume with our contemporary ears. And even if we can't relate to the idea of being cursed by running out of wine, I do think, though, we can relate to the idea of coming up empty. We can understand the idea of not feeling like we have enough. We can understand the feeling of a lack of resources to deal with whatever life has handed us at the moment. I don't know how universal it is. There's no scientific study here, but I've had a lot of conversations with people over the last months who spoke about feeling exhausted, weary, overwhelmed, over it, done in, with nothing left in the tank. Resources have run out. If you feel that way, or if you have ever felt that way, perhaps this story is for you after all. Because that is where this story begins. The resources have run out. And it's Jesus' mother who first notices the problem. And she prods Jesus to do something about it. And he says, "Mother," have any of you mothers heard that before? "Mother, this is not our business. Why me? Why now?" There really is no answer to that kind of question, is there? Just as there is no answer most of the time in life. Unanticipated things happen, and we have to decide how or if to respond. Why me? Why now? Well, Mary raises the issue with Jesus, and he has to decide whether, in fact, there is something that is his to do in this situation. Suzanne Stabile, who's one of my favorite Enneagram scholars, have you all heard me talk about Enneagram before? If not, ask me sometime, we'll go on. Anyway, Suzanne notes that these are key questions for all of us when the world comes at us, especially when we are feeling empty or approaching empty. She says that some of the questions we need to regularly consider and ask ourselves are, what's mine to do and what's not mine to do? What's mine to say and what's not mine to say? What's mine to care about and what's not mine to care about? Okay, obvious, but they are important questions for all of us. We come to those questions with different approaches, we come with different personalities, so we come to them with different reasons for asking. Let me say what I mean by that. You won't fit with all of these things, but listen and see where indeed you might recognize yourself. There are some of us who live by shoulds and oughts and rules. We have a tendency to think that if somebody said it, it's ours to do. Some of us tend to do whatever people in our life want us to do or need us to do, whether they say it or not. And some of us respond to duty and expectation. We do what we're told. And if in all of those cases, the question for us might not be so much what's mine to do, but what is not mine to do. Some of us need to ask this question because we like doing. We need to be reminded not to do things simply because we want to impress someone or make people think more highly of us than we think of ourselves. Some of us have a tendency to jump from one thing to another when things get unpleasant or hard or less fun. So asking ourselves what's mine to do can ground us in our responsibilities, in our obligations, what we said we were going to do, help us get something done. And some of us think that we have all the time in the world to do whatever we want. So asking ourselves what's mine to do slows us down to accomplish one thing at a time. And some of us will take charge of everything in front of us, so sometimes we need the reminder that not everything is ours to do. What is actually mine to do? And then there are some of us who hold back. It might be a lack of confidence, it might be fear, it might be that a belief that we're sort of past that now. It might be a feeling of emptiness, a lack of resources to respond at all. It might be reluctance for any number of reasons, and we need to ask ourselves, is there something that is mine to do here? Some of us get mired down in emotions or information or even personalities and possibilities. And when overwhelmed, we need something to kind of kickstart us into action, to just start, to find our part and do something. It is easy in the face of turmoil, when the world offers you circumstances you'd rather not deal with, to say, why me? Why now? And retreat into our own needs. To build walls around ourselves of grief or work, or even that it's not my business philosophy for protection. And if that's all you can do, God will sit with you and invite others around you to surround you with compassion and grace. But if that's not all you can do, if you are a friend or a neighbor or simply someone who notices a need, God will nudge you and invite you and push you to share yourself. And in this story, Mary is that nudge for Jesus. Mary's suggestion to Jesus is that there is something for him to do here. And we see him resist at first and posit the question. But in this case, Mary sees further ahead to how he will answer eventually. She knows that he can and he will help. So she sets the wheels in motion by getting the wine stewards involved, who are the ones who follow Jesus' instructions to fill the jars with water and then fill their pitchers and take the pitchers over to the host for service. And somehow, instead of running out of wine, there are gallons and gallons and gallons of it to be found. Not just regular wine, but really good wine. You saved the best till last, the host says. In this story, changing a situation from one in which there is nothing left to one in which there is overwhelming abundance is a group effort, with everyone doing what is theirs to do, starting with Mary. There's a theologian, Chung-Hyun Kyung, who has suggested that Mary is the key to this story because she is the one who raises Jesus to practice compassion. Because that's what this story is really about in its bigger context, an act of compassion that allows people to experience joy. It's also a miracle, but not everybody notices that part. In fact, only those who actively participate know that anything amazing has happened at all. But don't you think that's often the way? I often find myself in a circumstance thinking that what has come together has been truly amazing and nobody really noticed. And centuries ago, I think it was St. Augustine who said, God makes grape juice out of rainwater year after year after year, but we're so used to it in the vineyard, we don't see it as a miracle. The storyteller in John's Gospel calls it a sign. As in, don't get too focused on the sign, the story, the event itself, but notice what it's telling you. Notice what it's pointing to. Every time I read this story, it points me in a slightly different direction. Today, I'm noticing that we are called to participate, not control, not be responsible for, not create, but also not simply observe or receive or be a bystander. We're invited to participate in an experience of living that is beyond mere survival, that has space for celebration, whether or not we can literally have parties these days. When Jesus calls his followers to live abundantly, he doesn't mean a life of ease or comfort. It's not about luxury. It's not about material possessions, or even the absence of sorrow or suffering. Instead, he tries to show his followers, in sign after sign after sign, an extravagant and abundant source of grace that can sustain us when we are empty, that calls us forward to discern what is ours to do and not to do, and is, in fact, more than enough to provide when we fall short, that can give us joy amidst the sorrow and the struggle, that joins us to a source of life that is rich and full and eternal, a life that sorrow and suffering and even death cannot destroy. Pandemic life does not prohibit abundant life. Empty vessels can be filled again. I heard once that, just like the wine in this story, we are mostly water. We're water plus a miracle. Who knew? It turns out that this very old, ancient story is a sign that is still pointing at our lives, here and now. Thank God. Amen.